secular atheistic communists who fled the Soviet Union came to London, New York, and L.A. The real Soviet apparatchiks buried themselves into the Democratic Party. Look at people like Aperovich at CrowdStrike. Look where his father came from, an atomic scientist for the Soviet Union. They all fled the Soviet Union upon its collapse. The people who remained were not communists. The people who remained, and in fact, today, if you look at Putin and you look at the flourishing of the Christian church in Russia, Russia is now the United States of the 1950s, Tim.
Yeah.
You could make that analogy. But the people who came here burrowed into the Democratic Party. These far-left communists burrowed their way into this party and took it by force, literally. And now they've been defeated and they're fleeing to Europe. Having these celebrities go to Europe is not an anomaly. They are literally fleeing the United States to go to the EU, which has now become the new Soviet Union. There's a guy who did a speech about this going back to 1999, 2000, about how the EU is exactly the same as the old Soviet Union. Central bank, agriculture 5-year plans, states that are run by a central government in Brussels, like Moscow, different nationalities under the control of the EU. They can override elections. There's a million comparisons to the Soviet Union by the EU, and this is their last place left on the earth. That's where the battle is going to come. We are going to align with Russia. That's why Trump is being assassinated, not because of anything else but the common economic interests of our two countries. That's why they tried to kill him. That's why they went Russia, Russia, Russia.
I think also with the opening of the Northwest Passage, Trump's interest in Greenland, particularly, Trump's concern with Russia is that if we want control of this territory, we have to be in negotiations with Russia. Yeah. And if we are at war with Russia, the Northwest Passage is a hot conflict zone. So ending that war is going to be paramount if we're going to control trade through the North.
Well, it's not just trade. I mean, he's going to form an economic alliance with Russia. That's what they're afraid of in the EU.
If Trump were to form an economic...
he's already said he's talking economics with Putin.
Right.
Yeah.
But take a look at the Northwest Passage.
Yeah.
That means the rest of the world that wants to utilize this route is going to be working with Trump and Russia. Trump's probably thinking, look how much we will control if we work with them as opposed to fighting with them.
Right.
And they want to... It's the weirdest thing to me. The people who never cared about Russia before all of a sudden do. The people who never cared about Ukraine before all of a sudden know where it is. I don't believe it for a second. I think these people are cultists.
Yeah.
You see that guy who torched the Tesla stuff, wrote "Long Live Ukraine."
Yeah.
I'm like, that guy doesn't even know where Ukraine is.
Right.
Yeah. Real quick, though, I do want to give a shout out to Steven Crowder, Mug Club, all the people that are joining the show right now. Welcome to the Culture War. On Friday, it's a different channel from the morning news show. This is where we talk more in depth on various issues. So I really do appreciate you guys tuning in. Smash the like button, share the show with everyone you know. And we're talking government control and conspiracies and the current state of things. So that being said, my question for you guys, based on everything you've seen, we go back quite a bit. We talk quite a bit about JFK, but there's so much more in between then and now.
Right. I mean, the reason JFK is relevant is because it has echoes of today. JFK is really Donald Trump. If you look at the comparison of the two guys, multimillionaires, didn't take a salary, had a long history of womanizing in the past, two handsome guys. One was a Democrat, became a Republican. One who was a Democrat, JFK, couldn't even be a Democrat today. The similarities between the two are endless. Both of them anti-war, both of them pro-populist. I mean, I could go on and on and on.
JFK donated his entire salary to charity.
So does Donald Trump.
Yep.
I mean, the similarities are endless, bro.
Interesting.
That's why they fear Donald Trump, because he is the modern-day JFK. Never minding the assassination attempts. That's obvious.
Well, so here's a question then. Does Trump succeed in his endeavors?
Well, that's to be determined. Depends on, he now has a team of Avengers. So that's different from the first term, Tim. Now you've got spread out power that's spread out among other people. So if you take him down, you've got J.D. Vance. If you take down Vance, you still got Gabbard. You still got Pete. You still got RFK Jr. It's not centralized power like it was in the first term, where he could have a Mike Pompeo come to him and say, you can't release the JFK files because I'm showing you this thing in Mexico City about Oswald not really being there, and us ordering the torture of Sylvia Duran, and us owning the Mexican intelligence that did our bidding for the CIA. We owned the police of another country. And that's in the documentation that's in the JFK files.
His first term was on-the-job training.
Yeah, it was on the job training.
He's had 4 years now to figure out what went wrong, what did I miss, what did I get wrong, who do I ally with? So now he's coming back in as much more experienced and far more dangerous.
Look, put it this way. JFK ordered the removal of troops from South Vietnam. The generals and the ambassador from Saigon said, screw him, we're not going to do it. Same thing as Syria.
Really?
Trump said, I want the troops out of Syria. The generals bragged how we disobeyed his orders. The similarities are endless.
What do you think happens? Where do you think this goes? I mean,
well, it goes as far as Trump will push it. But everything goes as far as he's going to push it. This battle with the judges right now. How far do you pull an Andrew Jackson? Do you just say, you've made your ruling, now try to enforce it? Does he go full Jackson? Is really what we're asking ourselves as Americans right now. Because we've got, the thing about the judges, the reason the Democrats are so cocky under Biden, the reason they're able to do everything that they've been doing is because they're ace in the hole. When the shit hits the fan, when they are voted out of power, they know that the entire judicial system is run by them. That's why they're so arrogant. That's why they're so cocky. It's a power that nobody saw before until they went after Trump, until it's reached this crisis point where we're now literally in a constitutional crisis, Tim.
Caused by Democrats, not by Trump.
Absolutely caused by Democrats. Absolutely. It's their backup plan to retain power indefinitely.
And what they've been doing is claiming Trump's the one causing it.
Right.
When Trump has been acting under his authorities of the executive branch.
This has to be resolved. This can't continue.
How is it resolved?
It's got to be resolved by 4 or 5 men in the Supreme Court who've got to get a sack of balls and step up and make a ruling.
If the Supreme Court instructed Donald Trump to do something unconstitutional, should he do it?
Well, again, like Richard Nixon said, or other people said, I know pornography when I see it. If the Supreme Court says it's unconstitutional theoretically.
Do you think that Donald Trump should place male prisoners in female prisons?
Male prisons, female prisons.
Well, you're talking about the trans argument.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
A judge has just ordered Donald Trump.
Look, all of these rulings are by design. This is Mark Elias's across-the-board game plan to screw with Donald Trump. This is not accidental ruling.
I would argue it's the other way, too, because Trump is deliberately
he's
making these decisions to get them to do it. Because that right there, Tim,
he's trying
is
to
not
find
popular.
the most egregious cases on purpose, Tim.
Yeah, these are the 70, 80% in his
These are 80% approval rating cases.
So you think Trump's counterplay is he deports Tren de Aragua?
Yes.
Because it's a deeply popular issue.
87%.
And then gets the Democrats to defend the violent gangs.
That's what's happening. That's
or
what they
or a
keep doing.
trans prisoner.
And not only that, he's got a Supreme Court, he's got to shame them into getting a ruling.
So the argument then actually is Trump is intentionally choosing these cases to give him his own domestic casus belli of, I'm going to defy you.
Take it a step further. It's also to get him to intimidate the Supreme Court. They have to rule in his favor.
Yes. It's
to
going to
intimidate
get the public
John Roberts, to intimidate these people who are willing to vote against him. I mean, why does John Roberts have 2 adopted children from freaking Wales? I don't have 2 adopted children from Wales. And he can't find the paperwork to prove that he adopted them?
What, really?
That's right, friend. That's right.
What?
That's right.
What do you mean he can't find the paperwork?
Well, he can't find the paperwork for the adoption of the 2 children from Wales. I'll leave it at that.
See, what he's
Why do you go to Wales to adopt children? Let me ask you that, Tim. If you were going to adopt children...
From Latin America. Ireland born, but adopted through Latin America.
Okay.
Because Ireland has strict adoption laws.
That's right.
They were private and conducted illegally, but they drew media scrutiny during a Supreme Court confirmation.
That's where I got it.
No wrongdoing was ever found.
Well, draw your own conclusions.
That's weird.
Anyway, I think he's pushing everything to bring it to a head.
Yeah.
Every decision he's making is very popular with the public.
Yeah.
And it will be a case of the public will demand that he does Andrew Jackson.
Yes. He's not going to go Andrew Jackson because they will call him a king. And this whole king moniker is now floating around because they hope the American people don't know the true power of the executive branch of the government. That's why they're hoping that nobody learns that he does have that executive power.
Interesting.
But, I mean, what's going to happen? I mean, you can't have a district court judge in San Francisco ruling on foreign policy.
And we're having that in D.C. This is one of the craziest things I've ever seen. Donald Trump has negotiated an arrangement with a foreign president. A plane is in midair, and a judge instructs Trump to turn that plane around. Mm-hmm. It is beyond insanity to think, and this is what liberals and Democrats are arguing, that a president who's negotiated with a foreign government as to the extradition of non-citizen criminals and combatants would have to abide by a lower court city judge. Imagine Trump goes to Putin and says, let's end the war in Ukraine. Putin says, okay, deal. I want you to get your special forces and weapons out of the country. And Trump says, fine, the war is over. And then they load up the plane takes off, and then a lower court judge says, turn that plane around and bring the weapons back.
Well, I mean, that was
who would ever negotiate with the president of the United States again?
Right, of course. But that was the whole point of the impeachment. The two impeachments were designed so a local attorney general could not arrest a non-sitting president once he got out of office. And here's Letitia James and what's her name down in Willis, down in Georgia, putting a mugshot up of a former president.
The argument from the Democrats today is that any president in any foreign policy action needs to submit for approval from the lower courts. That's their argument. Mm-hmm. Trump is deporting non-citizens, and they said you can't do it. That would imply that Trump can't take any presidential executive actions on foreign policy or deportations without first asking a lower court for approval, putting the executive branch beneath the judicial branch.
Yep.
Look, what I mentioned, what Mike Benz is doing, what I mentioned about Eugene Moret in the Bosnian judicial system, part of what the deep state has done around the world is install judges in positions of power in foreign countries as the backstop to whatever transitory leader they happen to elect in a phony election. The like judges Brazil. Are permanent. Look at Bolsonaro. Look at the situation there and what he's gone through. That's the model. The model is the Bolsonaro judge down there. That's their model, Tim. That's what they want.
Yeah, but Trump is not. He's a man of consequence. Yeah. He's a no one to be trifled with.
No, absolutely, and he's also might be divinely inspired.
I mean, when that bullet flew past his head and grazed his ear, that's a freaky moment. You guys know about the George Floyd mural explosion?
No.
I love telling the story. Or? No, it's a few years ago. But I'll show you photos because...
I can't believe they did away with BLM Plaza in Washington.
Yeah.
That was amazing.
So take a look at this story. George Floyd mural struck by lightning in Toledo, Ohio.
Oh, I do remember this now, yeah.
They painted a picture of George Floyd on a wall with a crown.
Right.
The center of the wall and only one layer of it was reportedly struck by lightning and exploded. Okay.
That's brilliant.
There were some, look, this is the middle of the building.
Wow.
Beautiful.
That's divine.
Look, part of me, when I saw this story, I said, get out of here, dude. Someone went there with a hammer.
Sledgehammer.
Somebody went there with a sledgehammer and busted that wall down and ran off. And then they just said, must have been lightning, because nobody wants to go after the guy because they all hated the mural. That makes infinitely more sense. Thanks for watching this clip from the Culture War podcast. We're live every Friday, 10 a.m. to noon, so subscribe and come hang out.